You know, sometimes the stories that stay with you the longest aren't the ones that make headlines. Sometimes they happen in the quietest corners of the world, where nobody's watching, and that's exactly what makes them real. The pediatric oncology ward at Children's Hospital Los Angeles had a smell that December morning. Not a bad smell, exactly, more like the absence of anything warm. Antiseptic floors, recycled air pushed through ceiling vents, the kind of sterile emptiness that made you forget seasons existed outside these walls. Christmas decorations hung from the nurse's station, red and green garlands taped carefully to the edges of monitors and IV poles, but they looked tired, like they were trying too hard. Nurse Maria Elena Sandoval had worked this floor for 11 years. She'd seen children come and go. She'd held the hands of parents receiving the worst news of their lives. She'd learned how to smile through exhaustion, how to find small victories in blood counts and appetite improvements. But this December felt heavier than the others. Maybe it was the way the flu season had overwhelmed the hospital, stretching everyone thin. Maybe it was the three families currently in the waiting room downstairs, sitting in that terrible suspended silence that comes before doctors deliver results. Or maybe it was room 412. That's where Lily Matsumoto lived now. Lived, not stayed, not visited. Lived. Because for the past 8 months, this room with its adjustable bed and its view of the parking structure had become more home than the small apartment in Echo Park where her grandmother kept her bedroom exactly as she'd left it. Lily was 7 years old. She had acute lymphoblastic leukemia, the kind that usually responded well to treatment, the kind doctors called highly curable in their careful, hopeful voices. But Lily's cancer had other ideas. It came back twice. Aggressive, angry. The last round of chemotherapy had taken everything from her hair, her appetite, her energy. What it couldn't take, though, was the way she still reached for her worn-out stuffed rabbit every morning, or how she still asked the nurses to read to her before she fell asleep at night. Her grandmother, Keiko, was there every single day. 73 years old with arthritic hands and a 4-bus commute from Echo Park, and she never missed a morning. She'd arrive at 7 before Lily woke up, and she'd sit in the vinyl chair by the window, folding origami cranes from whatever paper she could find. Hospital napkins, pages torn carefully from old magazines. By now, there were over 600 of them strung across Lily's ceiling on fishing line, swaying gently whenever the door opened. The legend said 1,000 cranes would grant a wish. Keiko never talked about what wish she was folding toward. She didn't have to. On this particular morning, December 22nd, Maria Elena pushed open the door to room 412 carrying a breakfast tray that would probably go untouched. Lily had stopped eating much 3 days ago. The doctors said it was the medication, said her body was fighting, said a lot of things that sounded like hope but felt like delay. Maria Elena had learned to recognize the difference. "Good morning, sweet girl," she said softly, setting the tray on the side table. Lily was awake. Her dark eyes, too large now in her thin face, tracked slowly toward the nurse. She didn't smile anymore. Not because she was sad exactly, but because smiling took energy she no longer had. Her grandmother looked up from her latest crane, this one made from a colorful page of a travel magazine, some tropical beach neither of them would ever see. "She had a rough night," Keiko said quietly, her accent still faintly present after 50 years in America. "Bad dreams." Maria Elena nodded. She'd read the night nurse's notes. Lily had woken up crying at 2 a.m., asking for her mother. The same mother who dropped her off at Keiko's house 4 years ago and never came back. The same mother whose absence had become another kind of illness in this little girl's life, invisible, chronic, impossible to treat. "Hey, Lily," Maria Elena said, crouching beside the bed so their eyes were level. "You know what day it is?" Lily blinked slowly. "Tuesday." "It's almost Christmas. 3 more days. You remember what you told me you wanted to ask Santa?" For a moment, something flickered in those tired eyes. Just a flash of the child Lily used to be. The one who laughed at knock-knock jokes and made up songs about butterflies and once told Maria Elena, with complete seriousness, that she was going to be a veterinarian astronaut when she grew up. "I changed my mind," Lily whispered. "Oh, what do you want now?" Lily looked toward the window. From her angle, she could only see sky, gray December sky, heavy with clouds that couldn't decide whether to rain. "I don't want anything." It was the way she said it that made Maria Elena's chest tighten. Not sad, not angry, just finished, like she'd already made peace with something no 7-year-old should have to understand. Keiko's hands stopped folding. The half-formed crane trembled between her fingers. Maria Elena excused herself. She walked to the nurse's station, made it behind the desk, and then stood there for a long moment, breathing slowly, pressing her palms flat against the counter. 11 years. 11 years of learning to separate herself from the heartbreak, to do her job with compassion but protection. And still, some kids got through. Some kids broke the walls you built. Lily was breaking hers. It was nearly noon when the call came through from hospital administration. A celebrity was coming to visit the children's ward. This happened occasionally: basketball players, local news anchors, sometimes actors doing publicity rounds. Maria Elena usually didn't pay much attention. The kids enjoyed it, the photos looked good in newsletters, and that was fine. But the administrator's voice on the phone sounded different today, almost nervous. "He specifically asked that there be no press," she said. "No cameras, no announcement. He just wants to spend time with the kids, quietly." Maria Elena frowned. "Who is it?" "Keanu Reeves. He's downstairs now. He's dressed as Santa Claus." Maria Elena almost laughed. Almost. But something about the way the administrator said it stopped her. This wasn't a photo op. This wasn't a publicity stunt with a film crew and a publicist counting minutes. A famous actor had apparently walked into a children's hospital on a random December Tuesday, put on a Santa suit, and asked to see sick kids without anyone recording it. "Send him up," she said. 10 minutes later, the elevator doors opened onto the 4th floor, and Maria Elena understood why the administrator had sounded the way she did. He was tall. That was the first thing she noticed, taller than she expected, even in the slightly too big red suit with the white trim. The beard was fake but not cheap, the kind you'd see in a high-end department store. He carried a large red sack over his shoulder, and when he stepped into the hallway, he didn't move the way celebrities usually moved. No entourage, no nervous energy, no looking around for cameras that might be hiding. He moved slowly, carefully, like someone entering a space that deserved reverence. His eyes found Maria Elena's. Dark eyes, impossibly kind, carrying something in them that she recognized immediately. It was the look of someone who understood grief, who had sat with it, lived through it, and come out the other side still believing that small kindnesses mattered. "Hi," he said quietly. "I'm here to see the kids, if that's okay." Maria Elena nodded. "There are 12 children on the ward today. Some are sleeping, some have visitors, a few might not feel up to company." She hesitated. "And there's one girl, room 412. She's having a hard time. I'm not sure she'll want." "Can I try?" Something in his voice made her stop. He wasn't asking because he had to visit every room. He was asking because he'd heard the hesitation in her voice, heard the weight behind it, and that was exactly where he wanted to go. "Let me introduce you to the others first," Maria Elena said. "Then we'll see about Lily." For the next hour, she watched something she would never forget. Keanu Reeves didn't perform. He didn't deliver scripted holiday cheer or hand out presents like an assembly line. He sat. He listened. He asked a 6-year-old named Marcus about his favorite dinosaur and then listened, really listened, for 15 minutes while Marcus explained the differences between pterodactyls and pteranodons. He held the hand of a teenage girl named Adriana who was too old to believe in Santa but too sick to care, and he told her about his motorcycle and the time he got lost in the desert outside Joshua Tree and had to sleep under the stars. He made a shy 4-year-old named Tomas laugh by pretending the fake beard was attacking his face. And every time a parent tried to take a photo, he gently shook his head. Every time someone called him Mr. Reeves, he corrected them softly. "Just call me Kay or Santa, whatever feels right." Maria Elena watched, and she noticed something else. He was crying, not openly, not dramatically, just a wetness at the corners of his eyes that he kept blinking away. Every child, every story, every thin arm wrapped in hospital bracelets, he felt it, all of it, and he stayed anyway. By 2 o'clock, they'd visited every room except one. Maria Elena stopped outside room 412. Through the small window in the door, she could see Lily lying still in bed, eyes open, staring at the cranes on the ceiling. Keiko sat in her usual chair, folding. "This is Lily," Maria Elena said quietly. "She's 7. She's been here 8 months. She stopped believing in—" She paused. "She stopped believing in a lot of things." Keanu looked through the window for a long moment. His jaw tightened slightly, the way it does when someone is deciding something important. "Can I go in alone?" Maria Elena hesitated. Hospital protocol said no. Common sense said no. But something in her, something that had been a nurse for 11 years and had learned to trust certain kinds of instincts, nodded. He opened the door gently, and what happened next? That's where this story really begins. The door to room 412 didn't creak when it opened. It made a soft, pneumatic hush, the kind of sound that gets lost in hospital rooms where machines beep and ventilation systems hum their endless white noise. But Lily heard it anyway. Her eyes shifted from the paper cranes on the ceiling to the figure standing in the doorway, and for a moment her face showed nothing at all. Keanu didn't rush in. He stood at the threshold, one hand still resting on the door like he was asking permission from the room itself. The Santa suit looked almost absurd in this context, bright red against the pale walls, the white trim too cheerful for a space where cheerfulness felt like a lie. But he didn't seem embarrassed by it. He wore it the way some people wear grief, openly, without apology, because pretending it wasn't there would somehow make everything worse. Keiko looked up from her origami. Her hands froze mid-fold, the half-finished crane suspended between her weathered fingers. She recognized him immediately, not as Santa, but as the actor from the movies her late husband used to love. The action films they'd watched together on their old television in the living room that still smelled faintly like his pipe tobacco. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Then she started to rise from her chair, unsure of the protocol, unsure if she should bow or shake his hand or simply get out of the way. But Keanu raised his palm gently, a quiet gesture that said, "Please, stay exactly where you are." He looked at Keiko, and something passed between them, an understanding that didn't need words. Two people who had learned that love sometimes meant sitting in vinyl chairs for hours, watching someone you cherished fight battles you couldn't fight for them. "Hello," he said softly, stepping into the room. His voice was lower than it sounded in movies, warmer, tired in a way that suggested he hadn't slept well in years but had made peace with it. Lily watched him approach. Her expression didn't change. Most children, even the sick ones, reacted to Santa Claus with something: excitement, skepticism, a flicker of the wonder they used to feel. But Lily just watched, the way you watch clouds passing or leaves falling, present but distant, here but already somewhere else. Keanu pulled up the small plastic chair that visitors used, the one that was always slightly too low and vaguely uncomfortable, and he sat down beside her bed. Not too close, not looming over her, just near enough that she could see his eyes above the white fake beard, dark and deep, and holding something she didn't yet understand. "I'm not going to ask if you've been good this year," he said quietly. "That's a stupid question. You've been fighting. That's harder than being good." Lily blinked. It was the first genuine reaction she'd shown in days. Not a smile, not words, but a small shift in attention, like someone who had been underwater suddenly noticing a sound from the surface. "My name's Kay," he continued. "I know I look like Santa, but I figured you're probably too smart to fall for that, so I won't insult you by pretending. I'm just a guy in a costume. Is that okay?" For a long moment, Lily said nothing. Her fingers moved slightly under the thin hospital blanket, finding the worn ear of her stuffed rabbit, Machi. She held onto it the way drowning people hold onto ropes. "Why are you here?" she finally whispered. Her voice was so quiet that Keiko leaned forward instinctively, straining to hear. It was the most Lily had spoken to anyone except her grandmother in almost a week. Keanu didn't answer immediately. He looked around the room, at the origami cranes swaying gently above, at the crayon drawings taped to the wall, at the IV stand with its clear tubes running into the back of Lily's small hand. He looked at all of it like he was memorizing it, like it mattered. "I'm here because Christmas is hard," he said finally. It's supposed to be happy, but sometimes it's just hard, and I thought maybe there were some people here who understood that, people I could sit with for a little while. Keiko made a small sound, not quite a sob, not quite a breath. She pressed her hand to her mouth and turned toward the window. Lily's eyes searched his face. 7 years old, but illness had given her a strange kind of wisdom, the ability to recognize authenticity, to feel when adults were performing versus when they were present. This man wasn't performing. He was sitting in a ridiculous red suit in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and sorrow, and he wasn't trying to fix anything. He was just there. "My mom left," Lily said suddenly. The words came out flat, matter-of-fact, the way children sometimes deliver devastating truths. "She said she'd come back, but she didn't, and then I got sick. And now—" She trailed off, looking back up at the cranes. "Grandma's making wishes, but I don't think wishes work." Keanu was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice had changed, softer, rougher, like someone opening a door they usually kept locked. "I had a daughter once," he said. Keiko turned from the window. Even the machines seemed to quiet. "Her name was Ava. She was born sleeping. Do you know what that means?" Lily shook her head slowly. "It means she died before she could take her first breath. I never got to hold her while she was alive. Never got to hear her cry or see her open her eyes. She was there and then she wasn't." He paused, swallowing something that looked like it had been stuck in his throat for over 20 years. "And I used to think wishes didn't work either. I used to think the universe was just random, cold. That good people got hurt for no reason and bad things happened because that's just what bad things do." Lily was watching him now with an intensity that hadn't been there before. The distant look was fading, replaced by something rawer, the look of someone who had finally found a person speaking her language. "I'm not going to tell you that everything happens for a reason," Keanu continued. "I hate when people say that. It's not true. Some things just hurt, and no reason in the world makes them hurt less." He reached up and pulled off the fake Santa beard, letting it rest in his lap. Without it, his face looked older, more real. "But I'm going to tell you something I learned, and you don't have to believe it. It's just something I carry with me." "What?" Lily whispered. "The people we love don't leave us, not really. They change. They become part of the air we breathe, the light we see, the quiet moments when we feel less alone than we should. Ava never took a breath, but I feel her sometimes. When the wind moves a certain way, when I see little girls with dark hair." He glanced at the cranes above them. "When I see someone folding wishes out of paper." Keiko was crying silently now, tears running down the deep lines of her face. 50 years of raising a family, burying a husband, watching her daughter disappear and her granddaughter wither. And somehow this stranger in a Santa suit had just said the thing she'd been trying to fold into every crane. Lily's lip trembled. It was the first crack in the wall she'd built. The first sign that the little girl who used to laugh at knock-knock jokes was still in there, buried under layers of exhaustion and fear and too much loss for one small heart to carry. "I'm scared," she said, and then quieter, "I'm really, really scared." Keanu nodded. He didn't say don't be scared. He didn't offer false comfort or empty promises. He just nodded like fear was a reasonable thing, maybe the most reasonable thing in the world. "Yeah," he said. "I know, that's okay. Being scared doesn't mean you're weak, it means you're paying attention." He reached into the red sack he'd carried into the room, the one he'd set down by the door without anyone noticing. He pulled out something wrapped in silver paper, something small and light. He held it in his hands for a moment, looking at it like he was saying goodbye to it. "I wasn't going to give this to anyone," he said. "I've had it for a long time. It belonged to someone who mattered to me, but I think—" He took a breath. "I think maybe it's supposed to be yours now." He handed it to Lily. She took it with trembling fingers, the silver paper crinkling softly in the quiet room. She looked at him, a question in her eyes. "Open it whenever you're ready," he said. "There's no rush. Some gifts are for now and some gifts are for later. This one is for whenever you need it." Lily held the small package against her chest, next to Machi the rabbit. She didn't open it. She wasn't ready yet, but she held it like it was already precious. Keanu stood slowly. He looked at Keiko, who was still crying, and he walked over to her. He didn't say anything. He just placed his hand on her shoulder, gentle, firm, present, and stayed there for a long moment. "Thank you," Keiko managed to say, her voice breaking. "Thank you for seeing her." Keanu's eyes glistened. She's impossible not to see. He turned back to Lily one last time. She was watching him with something new in her expression. Not hope exactly, but something before hope. Something like recognition. Like she just discovered that maybe in this cold and random universe there were still people who understood. "I'll come back tomorrow," he said quietly, "if that's okay with you." Lily's voice was barely audible, but Maria Elena, watching through the small window in the door, read her lips clearly. "Please." Keanu Reeves walked out of room 412, closed the door behind him, and stood in the hallway for a long moment. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stood there, one hand pressed flat against the wall, breathing slowly, like a man who had just given away something he could never get back. And Maria Elena understood then that this wasn't a visit. This wasn't charity. This was something else entirely. This was a man trying to save himself by saving someone else. But what neither of them knew, not Maria Elena, not Keanu, not even Keiko folding cranes by the window, was that tomorrow would change everything. Because tomorrow, Lily's doctors would walk into room 412 with news that would shatter what little hope remained. And Keanu Reeves would be standing right there when it happened. The morning of December 23rd arrived gray and heavy, the kind of winter sky that pressed down on Lowe's angels like a lid on a pot. Keanu had barely slept. He'd gone back to his house in the Hollywood Hills, the one that was too big for one person and too quiet for someone who had learned to live with ghosts, and he'd sat on the back porch until 3 in the morning, thinking about a little girl in room 412 who reminded him of every loss he'd ever carried. He was back at the hospital by 8. Maria Elena met him at the elevator doors. Something in her face made him stop before he'd taken 2 steps onto the floor. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her usual composure cracked around the edges. She was holding a clipboard, but she wasn't looking at it. She was looking at him like she was about to deliver news she didn't have the strength to say. "What happened?" he asked quietly. Maria Elena took a breath. "The doctors did another round of tests last night, routine or so we thought. They found." She paused, pressing her lips together. "The cancer has spread, it's in her spine now, and there's involvement in her brain stem that they didn't see before." She looked down at the floor. "They're telling Keiko right now, they're saying weeks, maybe days, there's nothing more they can do except keep her comfortable." Keanu stood very still. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Somewhere down the hallway, a child was laughing at something, the sound sharp and strange against the weight of what Maria Elena had just said. "Does Lily know?" "Not yet. Keiko wanted to tell her herself, but Maria Elena's voice broke. "She's in the chapel right now. She said she needs a few minutes before she can face it, before she can find the words." Keanu thought about Keiko's hands, the way they trembled slightly when she folded her cranes. He thought about 600 paper wishes hanging from a ceiling, each one carrying a prayer that would never be answered. And he thought about Lily, lying in that bed with a silver-wrapped package she still hadn't opened, waiting for a tomorrow that was running out. "Can I sit with her?" he asked, "until Keiko is ready?" Maria Elena nodded slowly. "She asked about you this morning, first time she's asked about anyone in weeks." He walked down the hallway. His footsteps were quiet. He'd always walked that way, even before he became famous, even before he learned that being invisible sometimes meant being able to see things others missed. He passed the other rooms, the other children, the other families sitting in their own private universes of fear and hope. Each door was a world. Each world was fighting its own battle. Room 412 was at the end of the hall. He didn't knock. He just opened the door softly and stepped inside. Lily was awake. She was sitting up slightly, propped against pillows, and she was holding the silver-wrapped package in her lap. She hadn't opened it, but she'd been looking at it, turning it over in her hands, like she was trying to understand something about its weight and shape before she was ready to see what was inside. When she saw him, something in her face changed. Not a smile, she still didn't have the energy for that, but a softening. A recognition, like seeing a friend she'd known for years instead of a stranger she'd met yesterday. "You came back," she whispered. "I told you I would." He sat down in the same plastic chair. the one that was too low and too hard, and he didn't say anything else. He just sat there, present, the way he'd learned to be present for the people in his life who were walking through fire. Sometimes words were the wrong thing. Sometimes the only gift you could give was your silence, your attention, the simple proof that someone else was willing to share the weight of an impossible moment. Lily looked at the package in her hands. "I wanted to wait," she said quietly. "I thought maybe if I didn't open it, you'd keep coming back like a reason to have tomorrow." Keanu felt something crack open in his chest. He leaned forward slightly, his elbows on his knees, his eyes level with hers. "I'll come back anyway," he said. "Package or no package, tomorrow or the day after, as long as you want me here, I'll be here." Lily studied his face for a long moment. 7 years old and dying, and somehow she still had the capacity to search for truth in an adult's eyes, to test whether promises were real or just the kind of things grown-ups said to make themselves feel better. Whatever she found, it must have been enough. She began to unwrap the package. The silver paper fell away slowly, carefully, like she didn't want to tear it. Inside was a small wooden box, old and worn, the kind of thing you'd find in an antique shop or a grandmother's attic. The wood was dark cherry, polished smooth by years of handling. On the lid, carved in simple letters, was a single word: Ava. Lily looked up at him. Her eyes were wide. "Open it," he said softly. She lifted the lid. Inside, resting on faded velvet, was a small brass key. It was old-fashioned, the kind that might unlock a music box or a jewelry chest or something from another century. Attached to it was a thin ribbon, and hanging from the ribbon was a tiny folded paper crane, perfect, delicate, no bigger than a thumbnail. "I had this made 23 years ago," Keanu said. His voice was rough now, thick with something he usually kept buried. "After Ava, I didn't know what to do with my grief. It was too big. It was eating me alive. So I found someone who could make this a key to nothing, a key that doesn't open anything in the world except—" He paused. "Except the door you decide it opens, the door inside yourself, the one that leads to wherever you need to go." Lily held the key in her small palm. The brass was warm from being pressed against her blanket. The paper crane swayed slightly. "Where did the crane come from?" she asked. Keanu's eyes moved to the ceiling, to the hundreds of paper cranes Keiko had folded, all those accumulated wishes and prayers. "Your grandmother made one for me yesterday," he said. "When you were sleeping, she asked me to carry it, she said." He had to stop and breathe. "She said her wish wasn't for herself anymore. It was for you to know that love doesn't end, it just changes shape." Lily started to cry. Not the way adults cry, controlled, self-conscious, wiping away tears before anyone can see. She cried the way children cry when they finally feel safe enough to break, when someone has given them permission to stop being brave. Her thin shoulders shook. Her fingers clutched the key like a lifeline. And she cried for everything, for her mother who left, for her body that betrayed her, for the future she was beginning to understand she might not have. Keanu did something then that broke every hospital protocol, every rule about celebrities and patients and appropriate boundaries. He gathered her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, just bones and blankets and a stuffed rabbit named Machi pressed between them. But he held her like she was the most important thing in the world, because in that moment she was. He held her and let her cry into his shoulder, and he didn't tell her it would be okay. He didn't make promises he couldn't keep. He just held her and breathed with her and let his own tears fall into her hospital pillow. That's how Keiko found them when she finally came back from the chapel. She stood in the doorway, one hand on the frame, watching this stranger hold her granddaughter, and she didn't interrupt. She didn't speak. She just watched, and for the first time in 8 months, she felt something other than terror. She felt gratitude. The next 3 days blurred together, like watercolors left out in the rain. Keanu came every morning. He stayed until evening. He missed a scheduled meeting about his next film. He ignored 17 phone calls from his manager. He turned off his phone entirely and left it in his car because nothing out there mattered as much as what was happening in room 412. Lily was declining. Everyone could see it. Her vitals shifted, her breathing grew shallower, her periods of wakefulness became shorter. The doctors adjusted her medication to keep her comfortable, which was the medical way of saying they had stopped trying to cure her and had started trying to give her peace. Keiko folded cranes with a desperation that bordered on madness, her fingers moving faster and faster, as if she could somehow fold time itself into submission. By Christmas Eve, there were over 900 cranes on the ceiling. Keanu sat with Lily that afternoon while Keiko rested in the family lounge, forced by Maria Elena to eat something and close her eyes for at least an hour. The winter light came through the window at an angle, making the paper cranes cast small shadows across the walls, a constellation of wishes hovering over a dying child. Lily was awake, but barely. Her eyes would drift open and then close, open and then close, like someone caught between two worlds and not quite sure which one to stay in. The brass key hung around her neck on its ribbon. She hadn't taken it off since he'd given it to her. "Kay," she whispered. He leaned closer. "I'm here. I figured out what the key opens." He waited. "It opens the door to wherever Ava is," she said. Her voice was so faint he had to hold his breath to hear it. "And when I find it, I'll tell her you said hi." Keanu couldn't speak. He tried, but nothing came out. He just nodded over and over, his hand wrapped around hers, his vision blurred with tears that wouldn't stop no matter how many times he blinked. "I'm not scared anymore," Lily said. "I was, but I'm not now." "Why not?" She smiled. It was the first real smile he'd seen from her, small and exhausted, but genuine. A smile that belonged to the girl who had once wanted to be a veterinarian astronaut. A smile that held no fear, only peace. "Because the people we love don't leave us," she said. "They just change. You told me that. They become part of the air, part of the light." She looked up at the cranes. "Part of the wishes." Keanu broke then. Not quietly, not with dignity. He broke the way humans break when they encounter something too beautiful and too painful to hold. He dropped his head and sobbed, his shoulders shaking, 23 years of grief pouring out of him in a hospital room decorated with paper cranes and crayon drawings, sitting next to a 7-year-old girl who had just taught him something about death that he'd been trying to understand his whole life. She didn't comfort him, she didn't have the strength, but she kept her hand in his, and that was enough. That night, Christmas Eve, the hospital was quiet. Most of the staff who could go home had gone home. The halls were dim, the rooms were still, and somewhere in the distance, someone had put on soft Christmas music that drifted through the ventilation system like a ghost. Keiko had finished her 1,000th crane. She held it in her trembling hands, looking at it like she wasn't sure what to do now. 1,000 cranes, 1,000 wishes, and her granddaughter was dying anyway. Maria Elena found her standing at Lily's bedside, the final crane in her palm, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know what to wish for anymore," Keiko whispered. "I was wishing for her to live, but now—" She looked at Lily sleeping, so small and so peaceful, already halfway somewhere else. "Now I just want her to not be alone. Wherever she's going, I want someone to be waiting for her." Maria Elena put her arm around the old woman. "She won't be alone." Keiko placed the 1,000th crane on Lily's pillow, right next to her ear, where she would see it when she woke up. If she woke up. He'd tried to go home. He'd driven halfway there before turning around, something pulling him back to the hospital with a force he couldn't explain. He parked in the empty lot, walked through the silent lobby where a single security guard nodded at him without asking questions, and took the elevator to the 4th floor. The pediatric ward was almost completely dark. Only the emergency lights glowed in the hallway, casting long shadows on the linoleum floor. He walked past the nurse's station, where Maria Elena sat alone with a cup of cold coffee, and she looked up at him with eyes that said everything. "She's still here," Maria Elena said, "but just barely." Keanu went to room 412. Inside, Keiko was sleeping in the vinyl chair, her head tilted at an uncomfortable angle, exhaustion finally claiming her. The 1,000th crane sat on Lily's pillow, and Lily was awake. Her eyes were open, clear and bright in a way they hadn't been for days. There's a term for this, the rally doctors call it. A brief period of lucidity and energy that sometimes comes at the very end, like a candle flaring before it goes out. Keanu had read about it. He'd never witnessed it. "Hey," he said softly, sitting down beside her. Hey, she whispered back, it's Christmas. He looked at the clock on the wall. 12:07 a.m., December 25th. Yeah, he said, it is. Lily's hand found his. Her grip was weak, but it was there. She was there. Thank you for giving me a good ending, she said. Keanu shook his head. This isn't an ending. Yes, it is. She said it simply, without fear, with the clarity of someone who could see something he couldn't. But that's okay. Endings are just doors, and I have the key now. She touched the brass key at her throat. I'm going to go meet Ava, and we're going to be friends. And someday, when you come through the door too, we'll all be together. You and me and Ava and everyone else who changed into light. Keanu couldn't respond. There were no words left. There was only this moment, this child, this impossible grace. Will you stay with me? Lily asked. Until I fall asleep. He nodded. He couldn't trust his voice. And will you tell my grandma something for me when she wakes up? Anything. Lily's eyes moved to the cranes on the ceiling, all 1,000 of them swaying gently in the warm air. Tell her it worked. Tell her the wish came true. She looked back at Keanu. She was wishing for someone to wait for me, and you came. You were the wish, Kay. You were the answer. She closed her eyes. Her breathing slowed. And Keanu Reeves sat in a plastic chair on Christmas morning, holding the hand of a 7-year-old girl he'd known for 3 days and loved for a lifetime, and he didn't let go. Not when her breathing stopped. Not when the monitors flatlined. Not when Maria Elena came in quietly and touched his shoulder. Not until the sun came up and painted the room gold, making all 1,000 cranes glow like they were on fire, like they were rising, like they were finally carrying all those wishes somewhere they could be heard. The funeral was small. Just Keiko, a handful of neighbors from Echo Park, Maria Elena on her day off, and a man in a dark suit who stood at the back of the chapel and didn't speak to anyone. Keanu had paid for everything. The service, the flowers, the small headstone in the children's section of the cemetery. He'd done it anonymously through a lawyer because he knew Keiko would never have accepted it otherwise. It was the least he could do. It was also the most. Afterward, Keiko approached him in the parking lot. She was wearing a black dress that was 20 years old, and she was carrying something in her hands. A small cardboard box, weathered and taped shut. She wanted you to have these, Keiko said. She pressed the box into his hands. Keanu looked down at it. On the top, in shaky 7-year-old handwriting, someone had written, "For Kay, Merry Christmas." He opened it later, sitting alone in his car, unable to drive, unable to think, unable to do anything except exist in the weight of what had happened. Inside the box were 3 things. The first was a drawing, crayon on hospital paper. It showed a man in a red suit standing next to a little girl, both of them looking up at a sky full of paper cranes. At the bottom, in careful letters, Lily had written, "My friend Santa and me going to the light." The second was the brass key. The ribbon had been carefully retied, and attached to it now was a second paper crane. This one folded by Lily herself, Keiko had told him later on her last lucid afternoon. It was imperfect, lopsided, the paper wrinkled from small fingers that didn't have the strength to fold it properly. It was the most beautiful thing Keanu had ever seen. The third was a letter. Not from Lily, she hadn't had time to write one. It was from Keiko, written on lined paper in handwriting that slanted with age. Dear Kay, I don't know why you came to us. I don't know if it was chance or fate or something else. But I know this, my granddaughter died without fear. She died with hope. She died believing that love continues, that endings are doors, that someone would be waiting for her on the other side. She died believing because of you. For 8 months, I watched her lose everything. Her hair, her strength, her belief in the world, and in 3 days you gave it all back to her. Not the hair, not the strength, something more important. You gave her the thing I couldn't give her no matter how many cranes I folded. You gave her peace. I don't know how to thank you for that. I don't think there are words, so I will just say this. She loved you. In her way, in her time, with whatever was left of her heart, she loved you. And I believe that love doesn't end. I believe it changes shape. I believe it becomes part of the air we breathe and the light we see. Lily is part of that now, and so are you. You are part of my granddaughters forever. Thank you for being the answer to 1,000 wishes. With all my gratitude. Keiko. Keanu Reeves never told anyone about those 3 days. Not his friends, not his manager, not the journalists who always wanted to know what made him tick. It wasn't a secret exactly, it was just sacred. Some things are too important to share with the world. Some things belong only to the people who lived them. But something changed in him after that Christmas. People noticed it even if they couldn't name it. There was a softness in his eyes that hadn't been there before, a patience, a way of looking at strangers that made them feel seen. He kept the brass key on his nightstand. Every morning he touched the 2 paper cranes, Keiko's perfect one and Lily's imperfect one, and he remembered. Years later, in an interview he would never give, if someone had asked him about the meaning of life, he might have said this. We are not here to live forever. We are here to love deeply, even when it hurts. We are here to sit with people in their darkest moments and remind them they're not alone. We are here to be the answer to wishes we don't even know have been made. We are here to become part of the light. And somewhere in a reality just beyond the edge of this one, a little girl with a brass key and a stuffed rabbit named Machi is waiting by a door. She's standing next to a baby girl who never got to take her first breath. And they're both looking up at a sky full of paper cranes, watching, patient, full of love. Waiting for the people who will join them someday. Waiting in the light.